We are live, and 1 second, sorry. We are live. Welcome to everybody part of joining us here, part of our continuing series where we talk to professors, reporters, writers, columnists, activists, anybody on the left, anybody on the right. We want to provide their perspective to you unedited and unaltered so that you could do this thing that was popular when I was in high school called thinking for yourself. Maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. With us today, it is our privilege to have Dr. Elena Stepanova. She's an associate professor at the School of Psychology, the University of Southern Mississippi. Areas of expertise is the brain and behavior, social cognition, and cross-cultural psychology. She's at the Education and Human Sciences School of Psychology in the discipline of psychology. Her interests include social cognition, cross-cultural research, and applied social psychology, specifically effects of alcohol cues on social judgment, social categorization, prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination, implicit and explicit ethnic and racial attitudes, perceptions of attractiveness, and conceptualization of race in priming measures. She's worked at the University of Southern Mississippi, Florida Gulf Coast University, and the University of Missouri. She's a social cognitive psychologist and a principal investigator at the Social Cognition and Behavioral Lab, SCBL, the University of Southern Mississippi Department of Psychology. She obtained her BA in psychology from La Sierra University in California. Awesome. And an AM and PhD in social personal psychology from Washington University in St. Louis. She also completed postdoctoral training in addictions at University of Missouri. And there she is, I think, in Africa. Some of her work includes task measuring implicit attractiveness as a function of skin tone and facial features, the effects of skin tone on the perception of discrimination in young African American women, alcohol priming and blame attribution and acquaintance, difficult subject there, what drives racial attitudes in elementary school children, the role of feature-based discrimination in driving health disparities among Black Americans, and discrimination and stress reactivity to alcohol cues. And this was the research where we found the professor. Effective group polarization to opposition to Donald Trump. But before we do that, let's check in and see how well we did. Professor, did I get anything wrong? Do we need to correct something?
No, not at all. You don't need to correct anything. I guess I would just say that I apologize to your audience that I have not updated my website.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. No, that's totally fine. I would say that our main focus right now is really attitudes. So SCBL really works on attitudes toward a variety of social groups, a variety of social topics. We spend a lot of times looking at both explicit attitudes, meaning what people explicitly state, and implicit attitudes. So those attitudes that people maybe are not willing to express because of social desirability concerns. Maybe, they're scared how they would be perceived in public. And maybe even attitudes that they are not aware of, sometimes even themselves, or don't necessarily have access to. So I would really say that our primary focus is attitudes, and we are looking currently at a variety of different attitudes toward various social groups and topics. For example, we are currently expanding and looking at the attitudes towards social class, attitudes and stereotypes about social class, and whether or not those stereotypes are accurate. So my doctoral student currently, she's a Shahid. She's doing work on stereotypes about the poor and whether or not those stereotypes are accurate or not. And we are expanding on attitudes toward wealthy individuals. And so we're also going to look at whether or not stereotypes and attitudes about the wealthy, whether or not they're accurate or not. We're looking at the attitudes toward abortion and abortion bans. So we are in Mississippi, and it's really hot topic right now.
Yep.
And recently, we are currently expanding to look at the attitudes toward new financial instruments and how people use them, such as attitudes toward cryptocurrency and decentralized finance. So I'm sorry if I have not updated. All the topics that are there are still correct. We're just
Okay.
expanding and bringing
You
more
moved
things.
on. But the professors moved on
Yes.
to working on attitudes, explicit and implicit attitudes in the form she just mentioned. Can I ask you a question first? This may be outside of your subject area, but I have heard about this idea that people have attitudes and they're afraid to share them because they're afraid of being judged. And especially in our
Yes.
hyper politically polarized climate that this has gone up, I've heard some people say that you have national surveys and it shows uh, are people lying on national surveys because they don't want to be judged?
Yes. So basically, this is actually like nothing really new. So I think social psychologists, political psychologists have been dealing with it for years. So this is what I said about social desirability concerns. So people are concerned, people are worried about how others would perceive them. So even though lots of these surveys are anonymous or close to anonymous in some sense, but still people feel that they will be judged for what they're saying. So especially I think if we are talking about socially and politically sensitive topics. So yes, now if you go back to our previous last two political elections, I think they even coined the term like silent Trump supporter or
Yeah.
silent Trump voter, which might play out again in the upcoming presidential elections as well, where essentially what's happening is that some people feel uncomfortable voicing their support for certain candidates because again they feel that they would be judged. So this is the social desirability concern that comes into play, especially if maybe they are in certain circles that oppose certain candidates. So like my own example here, when we were trying to recruit students who were Trump supporters, we didn't manage to recruit as many. And I think part of it is because it's a college campus. And even though we are in the South, research has shown that younger people, college students, they're usually more democratic leaning or at least more liberal. And therefore, perhaps when we explicitly asked, because we had to identify those voters, they had to explicitly state that they are going to vote for Trump. So I think maybe they were not willing to admit that. And that's why even for the study that you read, we kind of failed to recruit as many Trump supporters as we hoped. So yes, I think it's definitely a concern. People not stating the truth and people being sort of cognizant of how others are going to view them.
I had watched when the 2016 presidential race came out, and almost all the polls said Hillary Clinton's going to win and she's going to trash Trump and he's going down really hard. And then he won. And she barely had, I think, a few more million votes out of 300 million than him. And they said, oh, well, we fixed all the polling problems. Won't ever happen again. And then in 2020, they predicted Joseph Biden is going to just trounce Trump. He's going down so hard. Barely got over 50%. And all the polling agencies had to come out and go, we don't know why we were off in 2020. And now we're not sure why we're off in 2016 because we were really off in 2016. We said we fixed it. 2020 wasn't supposed to happen. We've got it wrong 2 elections in a row. We don't exactly know what's wrong.
Yes, and I think part of it is definitely the issue of the silent Trump supporter or silent Trump voter. And part of it, I think, is the selection process that some of these companies or some of these polling organizations use, because some of them, I think, still rely on old technologies. So, at least several years ago, they were still relying upon sometimes calling people on landlines.
Yep.
And as we know, big segment of the population moved away from landlines. I don't have exact statistics, but that's for sure. I think it is very possible that they did miss large segments of the population, like that their sample just was not representative. And it's a big issue in both political science and psychology, getting representative samples. Like sometimes they use techniques that you might be familiar with, like they tried to weight the sample. They tried to say,
Yeah.
well, like we couldn't get 300 African American men voters, so we got 50 and we are going to weight them by 6. But the problem is that those 60 that they got, so they might be different than the rest 240 that they didn't. And you can weigh them all you want, but you still did not perhaps get the representative sample of African American male voters. So I think it's both issue of social desirability and the issue of the representativeness of the samples that those polling agencies are getting.
Thank you, because I'm not a polling expert, but I'd wondered the same thing, because I'd seen this going. I'd seen other professors saying, "Wow, it's hard to get Trump supporters to respond," but don't worry, we used our weighting metrics and compensated for that, and so we can safely say Joe Biden's going to win the election and totally blow away Donald Trump. And I'm like, "Ben, you got it wrong." And you said you did the same thing in 2016, and you got it wrong. I'm like, why are we having so much faith in the polling if they massively got it wrong 2 elections in a row, and they can't say themselves why? They can't point to it's this X. Why? I just got done reading a review from Pew Global Research, very reputable, and they had to conclude we're not totally sure, but we're sure it's not these things, but we're not sure what the problem is. And I go, well, that's weird. You don't know what the problem is, but you know what it's definitely not? How does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's really hard. I think it's really hard for political scientists and polling organization. It's tough on them because I think now they're operating in a brave new world where they have to whatever they relied upon, let's say like for the past 50 years, is not working anymore. And I think that we have, and I'm not a political scientist, but I know that there are a lot of political scientists that are actually looking at other metrics. So for example, looking at Reddit and Twitter and looking at what people are actually saying on social media sometimes, and I understand that it's not the formal polling that you're getting, but sometimes perhaps looking at that information at the social media platforms, perhaps maybe might give you more better results in terms of representation, because I don't think there is evidence showing that some groups are more engaged in social media than others. It seems that all groups are engaged equally. I don't really know how it's going to work with weighting the samples and finding specific numbers that they're targeting. But I mean, the old way of calling people, I think this is almost prehistorical now. And most people don't even pick the phone if they see or they have those numbers blocked and stuff. So I think they have serious issues with the representation, and I hope they're going to move, but it's tough.
I'd heard that. I heard that they still like landlines, and mostly elderly people have landlines. If you look at a broad sweep across the country,
Yes.
I mean, I have a buddy who's in his 40s and he has one, but he's rare. It's mostly elderly people, and so sounds like you're not saying that, oh, we didn't get the good sample size, so we'll just use these weighting metrics and everything will be totally fine. Sounds like you're saying, it'd be better to get a larger sample size. And it's a problem that you're not. And it's a problem that people may be telling you what you think you want to hear. And even if the survey's nondescript and you can't anonymous, people still self-censor because
Yes.
we're humans and we want to be liked inherently, subconsciously. It's just something we do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree that people perhaps self-censor even if the surveys that they are doing are anonymous. But also you have to realize, like, I don't know, like in terms of the degree of anonymity, if it's not online, like, so if somebody maybe sent me like a SurveyMonkey link or Qualtrics link, and I answered and I didn't provide information about my identity or my email or anything like that. They usually ask like your age, your gender, your ethnicity, but that's it. But like if they called somebody, for example, right? I think people people are going to assume that probably my identity is linked to that number in some way. And even though the pollsters are going to tell them that it's not, I wonder if those individuals actually having reservations.
Yeah, the other thing is I constantly, I mean, I see political polarization in America with my own eyes, my own friends. I see it on TV. I see a difficulty in Congress getting things done. But I'm told routinely, I just got done talking with someone, we have these national surveys. And these national surveys that we have year after year show that a majority of Americans agree on gun regulation and abortion and healthcare. But for whatever reason, we just can't get those laws passed, even though a majority of the people want that. And they have different reasons. The politicians do what the donors say, not what the people say. There's gerrymandering. And I go, how do we know the surveys are accurate? How do we know that when I'm being asked, do I support abortion? My thing is, no, I don't, but I don't want to be judged. So I tell you what I think you want to hear.
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. And I really like that you brought abortion because as I mentioned, we are currently doing some work on abortion and specifically abortion ban in our lab. One of my students this is her master's thesis that she's looking at the endorsement of abortion ban and abortion in the state of Mississippi and the South, depending upon different reasons, like emotional readiness of the mother, whether or not she has a partner, financial reasons, whether or not the woman or her partner have financial resources to raise that child. And I think that it's a lot like this is again like classical question. It's a very classical and old work. This is not something it depends on how you ask a question. So you might get different answers depending upon how you ask your questions. So you might ask a question about whether or not you support abortion, and you might get one answer. But then if you ask whether or not you support abortion ban, you might get a different answer, even though you might argue that it's the same thing, but it's not. So I wonder when issues such as abortion or gun control are asked by those national polling organizations, private, public, universities, individual researchers, how those questions are framed. I think it's very important how those questions are framed. And then also, I think it's very important to ask people generally, like, okay, so like, do you support abortion ban? Versus, I think it's important to also ask about specific. But if this is this specific concrete woman, right, that her income is this and that, she doesn't have a partner, she's still a student herself, what about her? So, and then you notice that you're not getting the same answers. So people who might say that, yes, they support abortion ban, if they maybe are dealing with a woman that was raped, or a woman, if you really provide personal information about the recipient of potential abortion, now they're not suddenly saying, no, like 100% she shouldn't get an abortion. You are going to get different answers. So it depends how you ask.
I know. Thank you. I can't tell you how glad I am for you to say that. I'm not an expert. I know you're thinking to yourself, these are old debates, man. Why are you bringing this up? Because a lot of the people who are professors in the political polarization space today and who have published this year and in the last 5 years are saying there's no issue with the national surveys. We can trust every single national survey going back 20 years. All of them were totally fair, and all of them show a majority of the public wants a woman's rights to choose and doesn't want guns in schools. And I asked myself the same question, how do you know they're not lying to you? And how do you know they're not self-censoring? And then the other question I asked, which I'm glad you brought up, is, do you support a woman's right to choose? Yes, great. So you're for aborting the baby 2 weeks before it's due. Whoa, hold on. I thought you meant like the first trimester. That's what I was thinking. No. I mean, 8 months in. That's cool, right? Whoa. So if you ask, are you for a woman's right to choose? Yes. Are you for aborting the baby right before it was going to be born naturally? Most people probably say no. So now you're getting wildly different answers.
Yes.
reframing the
Yeah.
question. Am I crazy for thinking that's a possibility?
No, you're not crazy at all. And that's why what we are trying to do in my lab right now, we are trying to see whether or not specific cases of specific women are going to elicit different types of responses by our participants, versus just very large blanket statements like whether or not you support abortion and whether or not you support abortion ban. And our hypothesis that no, it is actually going to differ. As you mentioned, that it's very different, like what's the gestational age of the fetus, what's the health status of the mother, what's the health status of the fetus, what's the economic situation of the mother, whether or not the rape or incest or some sort of abuse involved in the conception of this child, whether or not the woman has a partner, what are the adoption laws in the state. I think all of them actually do play a role in how people are going to respond.
I thank you. I wasn't an expert. I didn't have the academic pedigree, but I was thinking this got to be an issue, because I know people who self-segregate and don't always say what they think. Just I've talked to a lot of people in politics, and I see it all the time. And they'll say one thing to me when I talk to them, and then after half an hour of getting to know me, they'll go, well, okay, let me revise my answer. What I really meant was, and it's a more nuanced version that you could almost say contradicts with what they told me up front. So I heard information when they don't know me, and then sometimes I hear different information after I've started bringing down those walls and they feel that I'm comfortable to talk to. I've seen that a bunch, and I'm like, how do we know this isn't happening with national polling? You don't even get to talk to this person. You like call them up on a phone, or you ask a survey response, in a total, like, you have no idea who I am. I have no idea who you are. Just fill out this survey. And I go, how do we know people don't have biases? People don't have prejudices. People aren't tired of being judged. I just got told I'm a horrible Trump supporter who hates a woman's right to choose. Somebody calls me and says, hey, would you answer a survey on a woman's right to choose? Maybe I'm tired of being judged. And I go, yeah, I'm all for a woman's right to choose, because I just got yelled at 5 minutes ago and I don't want to hear it. And I look at the statistic, which nobody seems to disagree with, that there is a dramatically increasing percentage of the American public that doesn't want to express their opinion in public and doesn't want anybody to know their politics because they're afraid of being yelled at. And I'm like, we know that statistic's going up, but we can't translate that over to polling. People are scared of giving their opinion. They're scared of being judged, but that won't happen in polling. Nobody's scared of being, I'm like, that just never fit for me.
No. I mean, I think participants are wary how they will be judged. And I do think that some participants actually do have concerns about anonymity. So, and then of course, the other issue that you mentioned is that even if they think that they are completely anonymous, sometimes, we are social animals as humans, and we are part of large social groups and small social groups. And as you mentioned, humans like to be liked and adored and assimilated, and they have very strong social identities. We have very strong social identities, our group identities. So sometimes maybe they think, well, I am a registered Republican, so I should answer, even if it's completely anonymous, so I should answer this way. Or I'm a registered Democrat, I should answer this way according to it, according to my affiliation, even though maybe I have doubts or maybe I'm not 100% certain. So sometimes our group identities might dictate the way that we answer, even though we are not like 100% sure.
Wow.
And then, yeah. And again, the other issue, again, this is old stuff, again, that maybe some of your other guests mentioned, like in terms of the questionnaire constructions, because if you go vote, like they don't ask you to vote on a scale of 1 to 7 or on a scale of 1 to 10 or anything like that, right? It's yes or no, like there is certain proposition and you have to vote yes or no, or this candidate versus the other one. But I think in reality, again, like our attitudes might be more complex than that. And our attitudes might be on a scale, on a continuum, but it would not be captured by certain types of polling or any type of ballot, because ballots are never structured as continuous response scales.
That's brilliant. Hey, and again, let me tell the audience, I didn't know that, so I just learned something now too. I was thinking the only problem with polling was Republicans who were self-censoring. Now I've learned from the professor, you may have Democrats who maybe don't agree a woman should have the right to abortion, but I don't want to say that. I'm a Democrat, so of course she should have the right to an abortion. That's and the polling can't tell that. Is that what you meant in your heart, or did you say that because you want to be liked, you want to be part of your group, you don't want to not be disliked, and that's inherent in all of us? Oh wow, that's brilliant. Okay. Before we move on, were you in Africa when you took this question?
Yeah, so I was on
the
the
real sign that says
yeah,
Hakuna Matata.
yeah. That's the actual equator in Kenya.
Did they actually say, is that a real phrase or is that just a Lion King thing?
No, it's a real phrase. No, they are not lying. I think, it's a real phrase.
I didn't know that was a real African. Wow. So that is something they actually say in Africa. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. Because that was the point of the show, I have to ask you.
Yeah.
What was this study, the effect of group polarization on opposition to Donald Trump, done with professors from multiple different universities?
Yeah. So I do have to give credit where it belongs. So I had a wonderful team of colleagues that were willing to collaborate on this study with us. So I had actually a student, the last author, Kathleen Ramsey, who came up with this idea for her undergraduate research project. And I knew that we needed to get some people that were experts in political science. So Dr. Maria Becafigo, who is currently in Northern Arizona University, she's actually a political scientist, and she helped us a lot with the data interpretation on this work. And Brian Eiler, he is currently actually at Davidson College. He's a psychologist, but he does a lot of language work. So we kind of sought his expertise on language analysis. And the idea, again, this is a very old, again, it's funny, but I don't think there is anything like super new under the sun or under the moon. So this is actually very old phenomenon that has been described, the group polarization. This is the very basic idea that if people have an attitude about something, and if they're put in a group of like-minded individuals and they discuss this with that group, usually their attitude becomes even more extreme at the end. So for example, if somebody supports abortion and they go and they discuss why they support abortion, their reasons, if they discuss it with other group members, other like-minded group members, usually at the end, they support abortion even more, essentially. Okay. So we tested this basic idea. We hoped to test this idea with both supporters of Trump and those who opposed him. But as I hinted before in the beginning of the interview, we did have real difficulty people admitting that they do support Trump. So we didn't get as many, unfortunately. I think it would have been cool, but we didn't get as many supporters. So unfortunately, we ended up publishing this paper only with those that oppose Trump. And we did find this effect of group polarization. So what we actually did, we brought those individuals into the lab, and they discussed several different issues related to, like, these were very hot, I guess, issues during the 2016 election. So they discussed several of them. So we showed them official clips from the Trump's campaign on YouTube. We also showed them some of the clips of Donald Trump that were not necessary, ones that were part of his official campaign on those issues. And they discussed those issues for 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
Groups. Yeah. And we measured attitudes towards those issues before and also after. And what we found is that there was a subset of issues, not every single issue, but there was a subset of issues where this group polarization occurred. So specifically, those were attitudes toward immigration, specifically illegal immigration, political correctness, attitudes toward military, women, and also veterans. And what we found is that their attitudes became even more extreme after the discussion. So we did find this classic polarization effect in opposers of Trump. And unfortunately, like I mentioned, we only got the ones that oppose Trump, not the supporters.
I hear you. I hear
Yeah.
you. I bet if, though, you did the survey, if you could travel back in time and you could do the survey when Barack Obama was president, I bet you'd get a lot of conservatives who would give their opinion of Obama, and I bet you'd find some similar findings.
Possibly. But I if you can get Maria on your stream, I know that she ventured further and she's looking at very similar issues now on social media platforms. And it's such, I think this is really ripe for both political scientists and psychologists, political psychologists perhaps, because you're seeing the same group polarization effects on social media. You're seeing them on Reddit, you're seeing them on Twitter, where people are becoming, their attitudes becoming even stronger after interactions with like-minded individuals.
Yeah. Using focus groups, we examined support and opposition for Donald Trump prior to the 2016 presidential election. When in-group members participate in discussion, this conversation alone typically strengthens and intensifies members' initial attitudes. We used a pre-to-post focus group questionnaire to assess attitudes towards Trump, his campaign, and policies. We argued that group polarization influenced people's opinions about Trump, such that attitudes became more extreme after discussion with like-minded individuals. We report changes for Trump non-supporters, for which group polarization occurred on attitudes toward illegal immigration, political correctness, the military, women, and veterans after the group discussion. For each, level of support for Trump's views decreased. To further explore potential psychological mechanisms associated with the group polarization, we employed network science methods to examine the structure of the language associated with these issues and identify potential drivers of attitude change. Results provide some support for a common mechanism for group polarization, which may be driven by language dynamic specifics to individual attitudes. What does that mean that I understand the part about how you put everybody in a room and they all talk about how they hate Trump. They come out hating Trump even more. We've heard the term Trump derangement syndrome. I live in California, and it's people literally here thought America was perfect and we never had problems. And then Donald Trump came and he himself broke democracy and brought racism back all by himself. And I was like, that can't be true. But almost everybody I knew here thought that, because this place hated Trump like nothing. What do you mean about words, specific key words, and triggering?
So we did both qualitative and quantitative analysis. So the qualitative analysis, we just kind of looked for common themes that emerged in those specific domains that I mentioned: illegal immigration, political correctness, military, women, and veterans. And then we also did quantitative analysis. So these are specific software programs that were employed to kind of just look at the underlying language model. And what we found is that two that kind of constantly emerged. So one was power, and then the other one is in different dimensions of power, but one was power, and then another one was, I believe, military. So they emerged so like for immigration, we had power and military, and then again, power emerged for women, and then for veterans, military and power. These were the most common themes, I guess you would call them, themes or language patterns. But to be honest with you, there were some that like didn't really overlap. So like for immigration, we got like the submission to authority, power, the issue of doctrine, religion, military. For military, we got like the knowledge, the uncertainty, negative outlook, dominance. So they were slightly different for each of the, for each of the attitudinal groups. But the two that I think were kind of overlapping were power and military, And I think power and military both relate to authority or authoritarian personality or authoritarianism. So it seems that these types of kind of language networks got employed when people were talking about these specific social topics or social issues. So so that was just kind of like in terms of like what type of linguistic processes, like what type of language was used when participants were talking about those polarizing issues. And so like authority, authoritarianism, military kind of drove like those types of terms, these types of language was employed a lot when people discussed those issues. And I think it was really opposition to those, like opposition to authority, opposition to authoritarianism, opposition to military that drove most of those.
We reported changes for Trump non-supporters, for which group polarization occurred on attitudes towards illegal immigration, political correctness, military, women, and veterans. The group discussion for each level of support for Trump's views decreased. So how were you able to get the support for Trump's views to decrease? You would talk about the benefits?
So basically, yeah. So how basically we measured their attitudes toward those issues before and then after. And so we kind of gave, so again, they probably figured out that we're looking at the change of attitudes, which, you might argue that if you're given the same questionnaire, you might remember how you answered the first time. So, that's an issue, of course, with all the pre and post designs. But so we actually asked them about those issues before and after.
Okay.
So these were in exact same language. So maybe they actually kind of realized that we are doing that, and maybe that's why we are not getting the same results across all the domains, but at least we got them for some.
Okay. So the main point of the study was that you put people in an echo chamber, everybody agrees, they're just going to get more angry by the time they come out on whatever issue it is.
So, I mean, I wouldn't say that everybody agrees, but I think what happened is that, no, it's okay. No, that's fine. So I think what happened here is that when people are put in those echo chambers or, like artificial social groups in a way that we created, I think what happened is that people got exposed to other people's arguments. So like if, let's say like somebody's let's say like abortion. So maybe for some people the reason that they opposed Trump's view on abortion, so because we asked them whether or not they supported or were opposed to Trump's views on each of those issues. So maybe when they were talking about it, they thought that their reason of opposition to Trump's view on abortion was that some sort of a philosophical or, like some sort of philosophical stance, maybe. Something like, I believe that women should have control over their bodies, some sort of like a philosophical autonomy argument or something like that. But when they talked to their not classmates, but when they talked to people that were in the groups, maybe somebody else mentioned that it's a very painless procedure and it's very medically safe procedure. And then it was like, oh, I haven't thought about it, but it's also a good argument for opposing Trump.
Oh, okay, right.
And so like they got exposed to the arguments that they haven't thought about. And that, I think, strengthened their original position. So maybe like when we talked like the veterans, so for the veterans, we showed a clip where Trump talked in a very negative way about John McCain, saying that real veterans are not the ones that get captured.
They get captured, yeah.
So, and somebody maybe have said, well, I oppose his view because it's very disrespectful to the individuals who sacrificed their time. Sometimes they sacrifice their health, they sacrifice their lives. But somebody, so that maybe that was that individual argument. But some other individual's argument was maybe like, well, Trump opposes veterans because he actually dodged the draft himself, so they brought something else, something new. So I think what happened is that, and that's again, that's somewhat older argument from, classical social psychological studies.
Right.
The argument for the informational influence is that when like-minded individuals discuss something together, their pool of supporting evidence becomes bigger. So I might have thought about one argument why I oppose Trump's view on abortion, but 5 other people brought 5 other arguments. I'm like, wow, now I have 6. So definitely my opposition to Trump's view on whatever is going to strengthen, because now I'm like, it makes more sense.
It's a gripe fest. Okay. Okay. Well, winding down. Last 2 questions for you. This is my favorite one. You're not you. You're not me. You're a third-party person who's watching this video. You're never going to meet this person. They've watched this video. Wow, I learned a lot. Didn't know certain things. Challenged some assumptions. But I was struggling to remember it all. But they're saying to themselves, there's this one thing the professor said, and it's 5 days after the video. And while I struggle to remember everything in the video, I can't get this one thought out of my head. What is that one thought you want someone to not be able to get it out of their head 5 days after watching this interview?
Only one thought. Okay.
You can have 2 or 3. You can have 2 or 3. It's fine. We're gonna break the rules this time. Okay. Yeah. You can have 2 or 3. The judges say.
Yeah. Okay. And it has to be on group polarization specifically.
It could be on anything about America, politics, wherever, how we're going, where we're going, anything you want, roughly related to this.
I think my message here is that we are relying upon science to deliver the most accurate results. But I think we can't, because as scientists, we have limited, and not only scientists, I think opinion polls in general, we have limited tools. So we can only get as close as we can, given the tools that we have got. I think that's what I would say. So I think we really need more research. We really need more polling, and we need very much more accurate polling that's reflective of the fabric of the society and technological age that we are living in.
That's awesome. We need better, more accurate polling. That's awesome. Okay. I think you already answered the question. You don't have to, but we always ask, do you have any recommendations for someone else you think might be interested in the interview? We already have Maria Becca Figo, and we will
Maria Becca Figo. So she's a political scientist, and I think she can talk a lot about polarization in the digital world. That's her area of expertise. So if you can get her, I think she would be a very interesting. So I would definitely recommend her, because I worked with her closely. And I think that's where we are moving as a society. I do think that we might be able to get more information from people's online activities versus just, calling people up and asking their political opinions.
It's interesting. We're witnessing that transition in time, because I know surveys with telephones used to work for decades. And now it looks like, that age is over and we're going to a new one. So we're in that transition period. Something that used to work for half a century no longer is working like it used to. Can we deal with that? Will we make the appropriate adjustments? A lot of institutional difficulty moving forward that you have to deal with. Okay. Was there anything you wanted to say? Was there a topic you wanted to cover you felt you didn't have the chance to?
No, thank you for inviting me. I'm a social psychologist by training, but I am interested in political psychology as well. So I was glad to talk about some classical work, but also how we can apply classical work in social psych to current social phenomena. So yes, thank you for bringing me on.
I appreciate that. I will that will end the interview. I will email you shortly a copy of the video, and I want to say thank you for coming out, Professor. I appreciate your time and thank you for coming out.
Absolutely. It was a
Okay.
pleasure.
All right. We'll end it there.